Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Where are you guys at on the Matthew Tkachuk skate off the ice, Sally?
100% love it.
It's the coldest way to finish off a game. I think it's the funniest thing in the world.
I do the same thing in beer league when the game's over. I literally just run out of there.
Yeah, but you don't score. You just sprint off the ice.
Yeah, I grab the key and sprint.
There's about 5 minutes left in the third when he does it.
That's what he does at the podcast. That's what he does at work. Not what he does on an 18.
At NASA.
Though. At NASA, that's right.
Yeah.
At 18, he takes an extra shot off the tee just to
work on the game a little bit.
That's right. The fact that Tkachuk was able to do that twice in a row, like that's going down in a career highlight reel. And how much must that drive you insane if you're the Hurricanes? In your own arena, he does that.
I mean, depending on how tired the Hurricanes players were, they might have been a little relieved.
Some of the fans
saves a bit of time.
They were still getting some of the fans out at the start of game 2 who were still asleep.
They found some who rolled under the seats.
Yeah.
They just searched their pockets. Oh, they have tickets for both games. Just leave them.
Neither of you guys stayed up for that, right?
I was up.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, folks. Here to talk all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, international hockey, and just generally getting Evan's life together. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
Are you sure?
No.
He's trying to be Michael Block.
I wish.
Yeah.
No one's having a greater time in their life right now than that guy.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to talk to you about some updates from the World Championships. Not all of them good, because Joe Veleno did something pretty bad and out of character. So we'll talk about the Joe Veleno incident with Nino Niederreiter. We have a pretty big prospect profile today, one that I'm personally really looking forward to in Oliver Moore. We'll talk about the progress in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs as the conference finals roll on. 2 different series are 2-0 in pretty surprising ways. And the slow but fantastic implosion of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Shocking even for them. I was not expecting this. And so we'll talk about, the ripple effects it's going to have around the league and then whatever else we get into before overtime. Before all that, if you want to support the Winged Wheel Podcast, obviously we run all off season. We're still recording 2 episodes a week. If you're wondering how that happens, it's through the incredible support of our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to join the Dub Club, the benefits you get, you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We gave away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game last season, the vast majority going to our patrons. You get access to our bonus episodes, which record right after these main episodes, which are a lot of fun. The Thoughts with Evan segment is a fan favorite. And you get access to our Winged Wheel Podcast official Discord, which is a great community. It helps support the show, all of our continued growth. Any of our perceived success is because of our patrons. Our expanded content universe with the Expected by Whom, a new show that we launched that's hosted by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro. Our support of the Jamie Daniels Foundation and everything else, that is all supported by our Patreon supporters. So patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to contribute. Joe Veleno. What the hell was that? Completely out of character, right? Like, that was shocking to see.
Yep, not what I was expecting from his World Championship, which is now pretty much over. And it's one of those situations it's hard to form a thought on because it is so bad and so out of absolutely nowhere. Because one, I don't think he would do that in an NHL game, where the NHL is way more intense than the World Championship. The World Championship is, for half of these guys, like, this is our vacation to Finland for the year. We hope we can play hungover, like, type of tournament for at least the North American guys. I know the Europeans take it a lot more serious. So, not all teams are created equal in this. I think Joe Veleno was like their first or second line center, whatever you want to make of that for Team Canada. But yeah, in a lower intensity tournament, I don't know. That was so dumb.
So, for context, there was a scrum along the boards between Canada and Switzerland. Veleno was on the outside of it. Niederreiter was pinned up by another Canadian player, I believe, and his ankle. His leg was kind of stuck out, braced along the ice, but at a wide angle. Joe Veleno took his right foot, lifted it, and stomped downwards, blade first, on Niederreiter's high ankle / lower leg area. Niederreiter was okay, escaped without, breaking his ankle, or thank goodness the skate didn't cut through or anything. And then there was a scrum in front afterward. Niederreiter obviously went after him. They exchanged some shots, and to put it plainly, Veleno dove and drew the penalty. So the refs completely whiffed on this one. The IIHF afterwards didn't, though, and they suspended Joe Veleno for 5 games, which obviously is a huge suspension. International Ice Hockey Federation is traditionally a lot more stern, so I'm almost wondering if Veleno didn't get away with something bigger here. I could have seen them going a little bit more heavy, but still 5 games I think is a significant warranted suspension. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, that's not the Joe Veleno that we know.
Yeah, super. Yeah, like you guys said, like super out of character, really off of a nothing play. It wasn't like Niederreiter was really grinding his gears in the corner and the wires crossed. Well, the wires obviously did cross, but yeah, just really came out of nowhere and from a person you would not expect those things to happen. So I don't know. I don't expect Joe Veleno to become the head chef when he heads back to Detroit. So I don't know. I think he'll learn from this for sure.
There were, talking about that, I know you're kidding, Evan, but there were a lot of people wondering if this is going to have any implications at an NHL level.
Joe, Matt Cook, Veleno.
I think the Red Wings at worst will have will talk to him to say, hey, I'm sure you know, and based on the response here, like, don't do that, but just don't ever do that again. But they're not going to trade him because of this. He's not going to get like dinged on his next contract because of this. Like, this is very obviously like a one-off. If it starts to turn into a pattern, then sure. But no, he's not going to get kicked off the Red Wings for something that happened in the World Championships. I'm not saying it's a good thing or that it's nothing and it doesn't count because it happened overseas. Like, he could have seriously hurt Niederreiter, and he's lucky that he didn't. But no, the Red Wing, he's not going to not be a Red Wing because of this.
Possibly, but his trade value has now gone up because of how old hockey men love truculence and a-holes on the ice. Old hockey men love a good prick on the ice. So Joe Veleno's trade value just skyrocketed.
This is the budget version of Matthew Tkachuk that we've been looking for.
Everyone now. You know what? The monkey paw curled when I said, please stop comparing everyone to the next Braden Point, because it's now morphed into everyone is now the next Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah.
That's so I brought that onto us. And I love how you're saying old hockey men love this. I think it was last episode where you were like, the Red Wings need more pricks.
It literally was the last
there you
episode.
go.
We are approaching Brad's birthday, so yeah, you are becoming an older hockey man.
So I need to say this out loud. Joe, thank you for listening. This isn't what I meant.
Details matter, Brad. Be a little bit more specific. Write your instructions so your kids can understand them.
This is my fault.
Yeah.
I understand. That's why I'm clarifying. Joe, no.
That is a father of kids who are starting to be able to read and understand instructions and who has been hurt before. That's Joe Veleno in the World Championships. Not a great one. Not much else to be said about it. I don't know if you guys have or genuinely think that anything else could come from it at an NHL level, but it's kind of a settled matter. Suspended for 5 games at the international level. Doesn't affect him at the NHL level. I'm sure the team will hope that we never see this from him again, and I think that's where all Red Wings fans are too. You can't blame any of the backlash for people who are upset about it, and right now it's just like, you hope it's a one-off, and you're just happy Niederreiter didn't get hurt. That's it.
Yeah.
Wires got crossed.
Yep.
Okay, let's jump right into the prospect profile that we've been waiting to talk about for a long time, because I think he's a guy who's going to be really interesting for Detroit to potentially pick at pick 9, or depending on what you think about the draft, some folks think he could be available at 17 or in between there. But Oliver Moore, center out of the USNTDP, touted as the best skating player in this draft. Brad, your comparison to him has been, this is the Larkin archetype or the second Larkin that we've been talking about for a while. Who is Oliver Moore? What kind of prospect is he relative to his peers? And is this a potential, go-to pick in your mind for Detroit at pick 9?
I think he's going to be one of the strongest candidates And I think that's a universally true statement, regardless of what anyone feels about him, because this player probably fits the Yzerman Red Wings archetype more than any other player in this draft. High motor, high speed, ultra competitive, very smart hockey player. All the things the Red Wings traditionally have looked for since Yzerman has taken over. And this has probably he is probably the closest pre-draft Dylan Larkin comparable since Dylan Larkin was drafted. We've used Larkin as kind of a rough, idea for what a player might be in the past, but no, Oliver Moore fits the Larkin description almost to a T. Most competitive guy on the ice when he's out there, generally the fastest guy on the ice when he's out there, generally the smartest guy on the ice when he's out there. The hands aren't bad, but they're nothing special. The shot's not bad, but it's nothing elite. So if you want to see what Oliver Moore's best case scenario is, we've been watching it. Yeah, and I got to repeat, that's best case scenario. I'm not sitting here and saying Oliver Moore is going to be Dylan Larkin. Otherwise, he's not getting out of the top 5. That's just how this works, because there is margin for error. The big divide amongst the scouting world on Oliver Moore is what is his ultimate offensive upside, because most people like his offense. He's not devoid of offense. He had to anchor the USNTDP's second line because obviously he was the number 2 center behind Will Smith this year. A very similar situation to what Dylan Larkin was in with the USNTDP when he was behind Jack Eichel. So again, all the comparisons are lining up perfectly. And even at that point, he still put up big numbers. He was the driver of his line. He was able to do just about everything he needed to do, despite not having Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard on his wing for most of the season. So if you believe his upside is going to be roughly that of Dylan Larkin, he is a no-brainer pick at number 9. You better sprint to the stage and take him. But not everybody agrees that is possible. Not everybody agrees that is in his repertoire. I am personally a big believer in Oliver Moore. He is probably my favorite, if not at worst, top 2 or 3 guys that I think will be there at number 9 for the Red Wings to pick. Because, obviously he fits what the Red Wings are trying to build, and I think the offense is there. So, just depends on what the Red Wings think that ceiling is.
I'm glad you called out the offensive ceiling question, because that is the biggest question mark for me. But looking at him purely as a player, 100%. The skating is phenomenal. The effort is phenomenal. And that we don't like to blindly on the show just draw comparisons arbitrarily to players just for a simple comparison. But I do see it with Larkin. Like Larkin, especially at draft time, there is no standout individual stick handling or ability to snipe it or whatever that made him this guy could be a point per game player. It's more about being in the right places, putting the puck in the right places, and just grinding and skating your ass off and doing it really well. And that comparison is there for Oliver Moore. I'm right there with you. One of my favorite players for Detroit at 9. I have that same question though of, is he just the best of the rest that you can take, and you're not really going to do much better than a guy whose most likely outcome is middle 6 center? Or does it make more sense to take a bigger swing on someone else? Like let's say Zach Benson follows, or Dalibor Dvorsky is there, or whatever it is. Are their offensive upsides and ability to put out offense a little bit more substantial? So the question for Moore is 2 things for Detroit in my mind. Like we know all his bona fides. Brad just laid it out perfectly. If you're the Red Wings, you look at him and you say, do you think he is going to be an everyday center? And 2, do you think his offensive production is higher than what was showed because he was buried behind a very record-breaking productive first line with the USNTDP, and his development can continue kind of the way Dylan Larkin's did. Based on his fundamentals, you can teach him to produce the way Dylan Larkin has. And he's not going to be on highlight reels the way Connor Bedard is going to be, but he's still going to be able to put up, 65 plus points for you as a second line center. So I think those things are possible. I am just wary of how small is that window, like how limited is that that portion of his projected outcomes.
I think it's actually a benefit for him to not be playing on the top line of the USNTDP, because for me, it's a realization that he doesn't need elite wingers to produce. He still was over a point per game and had over 30 goals this year. So I think for me, it makes the fogginess around him a little bit more clear. So, you know, if you're looking for a Dylan Larkin type player, and the Red Wings have terrible foot speed, as we all know.
Yeah.
Like, I think he fills a hole that the team desperately has, and he's likely to play center at the NHL level. So, yeah, his hands aren't great. He's moving very fast to have exceptionally good hands. But, you know, those are things he can work on, and he's got high compete, so that makes me believe in a guy who can, you know, hone his game. I don't know if he's NHL ready soon. Like,
yeah.
And that, you know, depends on what the team thinks their timeline might be. But you know, if that's the guy they take at 9, I would be incredibly thrilled with that.
It would also allow you to take a bigger risk. Like, let's say you went Oliver Moore. Not that you have to, like, these guys are going to be tied to each other for the rest of their careers, but if you went Oliver Moore and then with either pick 17 or if you traded up from it, Matthew Wood is a lot more. It's a lot easier to stomach that risk if you have a guy who, you know, maybe doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but could be more of an everyday NHLer with a little bit more certainty, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, the term safe draft pick gets misconstrued a lot in terms of low ceiling but high floor. So I don't want people to think that's what I'm saying here. Oliver Moore is one of the safer picks in the first round because his floor is very, very high with his skating, compete, and hockey sense. To me, at worst, he's the Red Wings' third line center. So you pick him at 9, you're getting a player out of the first round of this draft. So yeah, that does allow you to take a bigger swing, because the one thing that absolutely cannot happen under any circumstance for the Red Wings in this draft is they whiff on both. If this was this was a single pick year, they couldn't whiff on it. So the fact they have 2 first round picks, if they can come out of this with 1 top 6 forward, they are doing amazingly well. And if Oliver Moore is a third line center, that might be disappointing relative to the 9th overall pick. But then you take a gamble on a Callum Ritchie, a Matthew Wood, a Edward Shala. All of a sudden, yeah, you get a top 6 forward with the second pick, and you still get a usable player in the first one. You're still ecstatic with how that draft turned out, right? You know, we always, for example, you know, not dunk, but like we're always upset with how the Zadina pick turned out.
Yeah.
The 2018 draft is still a very successful draft. The Red Wings' first 3 picks all turned into NHL players, and the third guy they picked is probably the one guy who's going to spend the most time in the top 6 in Jonathan Berggren, because he was the type of guy that was no sure bet in his draft, and you know they rolled the dice on him and they got a player out of it. So yeah, this will be to a lesser extreme the same kind of circumstance.
So what do you think about Oliver Moore compared to those guys that I mentioned, Dalibor Dvorsky, Zach Benson, Ryan Leonard? Like, if they're on the board, do any of those guys say no, make you say no automatically? I'm sorry, I really like Oliver Moore, but I'm going for, you know, Dvorsky's offensive upside, or I'm going for Ryan Leonard's, you know, Bertuzzi 2.0 archetype, or whatever it is?
Every one of them should give you pause. And all 4 of them are very different players. So, you know, it's a boring answer, but the true answer here is, what's your flavor, right? Because Zach Benson's that small, shifty winger. Leonard's the high-end shot with the grit. Dvorsky's, you know, more of your he is a 200-foot player, but your offensive guy, and Oliver Moore's your 200-foot player. So, yeah, I don't know. I could be talked into any one of them pretty comfortably. And obviously, you know, it's not good the Red Wings didn't win the draft lottery, but we've said it before. It's a good year to at least be in the top 10, because there's it's a certainty one of those guys is going to be there when the Red Wings are picking.
Like, looking at the guys in that range, Oliver Moore, like the positionality is doing it for me. I agree with you, Evan. I think he has what it takes to be an everyday NHL center. He might not start out that way. He might have to start on the wing. We're probably going to see if all goes well, a Dylan Larkin development path, like you mentioned, Brad. But for Detroit to have Larkin, potentially Casper in the top 6 center role, provided that pans out, and then Oliver Moore behind him, is that going to, light up, best center depth ranking lists across the NHL? No, but it's something that you could potentially really work with, and it's young, and it's hard to play against, and it's fast.
It'll certainly breed competition for that second line center position too. So injecting a lot of high end centers from your draft may actually, secure the development of those types of players.
I agree, and there's no shortage of potential players who at pick 17, or even if you trade up from it, could be like home run swings. I mentioned Matthew Wood. I mentioned Ryan Leonard, Shala, depending on what you think about him, Braden Yeager. Not all these guys are going to be available all the way down there. Gabe Perreault, they're not all going to be available down there, but if you secure that center with what should be, hopefully, and don't clip this because it's going to be played in a year and I'll look like a dummy.
On the Jumbotron at the LCA.
Oh, God. The Red Wings social team has burned us before, and they'll do it again. We love them for it. But this should be Detroit's highest draft pick, hopefully in a long time. If you can use that pick to nail down a center, I think Oliver Moore is a great kind of last hurrah with that premium pick. All of this to say, I am still a big proponent of trading and working with what you got, because Steve Yzerman has a ton of high-end picks, 9, 17, and 3 picks in the second round. And as Evan says all the time, you can't draft all those players. There's no room for all those players. We are already seeing the pipeline starting to get crammed up. You're starting to have to make these decisions to move them out. Not to say it's bad to have high-end prospects. 3 second-round picks would be amazing if that's the route that they go, but you're eventually going to need to make decisions and move those assets around. So, yeah, Oliver Moore for me, one of my favorite prospects in the draft, especially with where Detroit's drafting. I'm not saying it would be wrong to not take him if they took Perreault or Dvorsky or whoever over him, but I would be thrilled if they walked away with him.
I've seen rankings where he's like outside the top 15, or mocks where he's outside the top 15. I just can't. I just can't see a situation where he's sitting there at 17 for Detroit. No. I just can't.
Because it's not going to happen, because he's a 200-foot center with speed.
Yeah,
and everybody knows you need speed in the NHL these days, and everyone's always looking for centermen.
I don't think that those mocks are necessarily wrong in that it's impossible that he is like the 17th best player out of the draft class. Like I don't disagree on that front.
Poop their pants and pick a defenseman because they think they need one more than anything else.
Totally. But yeah, I agree. If this was a winger or, a different position, then maybe I could see him sliding. But I agree. I have a hard time believing that a two-way 200-foot center with speed is going to fall that far. I mean, it'd be great if he did. I'd be over. Imagine you took Leonard Moore.
I'll put it this way. If the Red Wings take Dvorsky or Leonard or whoever at number 9, and Oliver Moore's still sitting there at 13 or 14, if I'm Steve Yzerman, I'm not hanging up the phone until someone lets me trade up.
Agree. And there will be.
That's what I was thinking. Like I'd rather keep 9 and then leverage the second round picks with 17 to move up and secure someone like him if he is somehow slipping down the board.
Yeah. That's like a dream.
Somebody's got to slip, right? There's like 13 guys, 14 guys who can go in the top 10. Somebody's got to slip.
Oh, yeah. It's not a unique phenomenon. Every year that happens. Someone slips.
There's going to be David Reinbacher's going in the top 5 or something outrageous.
Yeah.
It happens every year.
And it has been Detroit.
They took Mo Seider.
It worked out, but they were the wild card of that draft.
Yeah. Yeah. We've learned we always talk about how we've grown in our prospect profiling and things through this show, and we've gotten a lot better at it. And it's not just analysis of the players, but it's also the hard lessons of do not get married to a prospect or a plan, because what you think and what the public consensus is goes so far out the window.
Yeah, it's like, if it's not these 3 players, the draft's a bust.
Yeah,
we've got burned. I get burned on that every year. I'm like, if it's not one of these 3 guys, I'm just gonna bitch and moan on the internet.
We probably should have more conversations along the lines of, do you know what I really like at 9th overall? Clayton Keller. Do you know what I really like at 17th overall? Nick Schmaltz.
Can you imagine? And I want to say this is perfectly possible. Can you imagine Yzerman says, none of these guys are inspiring. I have the option to bring in, Keller and Connor using these 2 first-round picks and whatever else. We could not, like, the Red Wings don't draft in the first round, and we're just sitting here on the draft live stream like, oh, what do we do with our hands?
Like, well, have a great night, everybody.
Welcome to the NHL draft, and we just watched 10 hours of Clayton Keller footage that we are going to break down for you. We will occasionally update picks.
We are going to have that Clayton Keller conversation in the future.
I know. And Nick Schmaltz. It's going to be a one-stop shop.
That's right. We just constantly talk about Arizona and Toronto in this podcast.
Oh, there's
Two big
say
holes?
the west of us or east of us.
Yeah.
There's a buffet line lining up too.
Yeah, out in Toronto.
But Toronto, you know what? Okay, this sounds so backwards to say when we get to it. The trade options on Arizona are actually way better for Detroit.
I would agree.
Because everybody in Toronto of interest is they do not have term left on their contract, and Detroit is not in the position to be trading for 1 or 2 year rentals, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Keller's got a bunch of years left. I think Schmaltz has 3 years left or something like that. So those are actually more intriguing options to me, despite being not as good players.
And we'll talk about them. Trade options are going to be a thing. For now, that is Oliver Moore's prospect profile. Obviously, a guy that we're going to be talking about as we approach the draft, which is quickly coming. So stay tuned as we get into some more of the bigger name profiles, bigger mock drafts, and the schedule leading up to the 2023 NHL draft. For now, let's jump over to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and let's talk about what we were talking about before, which Tkachuk closing it out in overtime twice. Thank goodness this time in the second game, he only took 1 overtime to do it. The first game nearly made it to 5 overtimes, which was nice for them to stay up while I was editing the podcast. I appreciate that. But 2-0 Florida leaving Carolina, and they have double home ice advantage going back to Florida.
What is going on?
I love it so much. These playoffs have thrown everyone's expectations right out the window.
Okay, all right. Stats minor.
God.
I need
dust the old thinking cap off.
Yeah, I need to know the odds on this happening in professional sports. The Florida Panthers come into the Eastern Conference playoffs as an 8 seed. They have a 2-0 series lead in the conference finals. The Miami Heat go into the NBA playoffs as an 8 seed. They have a 3-0 series lead in the conference finals. How? They're basically in the same area. They're basically Sunrise, Miami, Florida. We'll call it the same city for simplicity's sake of this conversation. 2 8 seeds from the same area. 2-0 and 3-0 leads in the conference finals.
I'd say there's something in the water, but I think we already know that about Florida.
Yeah, my best answer here is 50-50. It either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah.
That is it. Good on the fans in Florida. They're getting a treat right now.
Yeah, because Florida fans have had a real tough time winning championships over the past decade.
It's been hard for them.
Yeah.
It's funny because in the NHL, you had the LA Kings coming in as the 8th seed, and then that was the fuel for every GM across the league to say, hey, anything can happen. And then enough time got removed from that, and then St. Louis took up the mantle. They got in as a late seed after a terrible start to the first half of the season. They won the cup, and anything can happen. And now Florida comes in, the mess of like mouth-breathing, drooling, idiot NHL teams who are all trying to lose their way out of those 2 wildcard spots. Florida comes in and takes advantage of Pittsburgh just completely blowing it and everyone else sucking. Now they are 2-0 up on the first seed or the 1 seed Carolina Hurricanes as the second wildcard team. This doesn't happen all the time, but it seems to happen recurring at a periodic rate.
Okay, I have to bring this up because this is such a misnomer, and teams, this talking point ruins franchises. And I mean that almost literally, because this is when you see like 8 and 9 and 10 seeds going out and being buyers at the deadline. The Kings were the best team in the NHL post-Christmas that year. They were supposed to be very, very good all year and just had a slow start. And then once they hit their stride, they were just dummying people all the way up to the playoffs. They just had a bad start. St. Louis Blues, same thing. Florida didn't quite have that like Christmas time switch that those two teams did, but these are the reigning President's Trophy champions. They were supposed to be a lot better than their regular season was. So us as Red Wings fans, if we're sitting in the 8th seed next year, guys, it's not going to happen this way. I just need you to know that. But
unless
we get a Ryan Leonard who's a Brady Matthew Tkachuk light.
Unless you believe Ville Husso can go full Sergei Bobrovsky for 4 straight playoff rounds.
You want to know my hot take? And I've said this before. any goalie in the NHL can do what Sergei Bobrovsky is doing. There's no rhyme or reason.
what?
It's just what the hockey gods dictate.
Oh, what? Next you're going to tell me Aiden Hill's up 2-0 in a
what I'm
conference
saying,
final?
dude. Like, they...
Sure, Ryan. I'll believe it when I see it.
If anything, it's made the goalie contracts even more confusing.
Yes.
Because, you got the $10 million guy, and you got the guy who's on waivers, who's also playing incredible. It's like, I don't know, give him $4 million these days. I don't know anymore.
Pay who you want, however much you want. It doesn't matter. It's not up to you. The hockey gods dictate it. Goalies are beyond voodoo. It's just the way of life. And I'm giving Evan a little bit of service here. It's like golf. Just the most random guy is going to come in and have the best weekend of his life, and all of a sudden you have, a PGA Club Pro coming in at 15th in a major at the PGA Championship. Like, it is just any guy can come in, and it's just about getting hot at the right time. Yeah, I'm being reductive here.
I mean, Florida is hot at the right time, and they believe in themselves.
Yeah, 100%.
And the further we get into spring, it's only getting hotter.
Okay.
Especially in Florida.
Take care, folks. That's all. And you know what? I was thinking about this as I was driving today. Sergei Bobrovsky's contract has been rough. Like, they have not been getting what they want from a guy who they're paying $10 million. That's a $70 million deal. It's hampered them. They've tried to get out of the contract.
They win the cup this year. Who cares?
Whole thing's worth it.
Who cares?
One
Doesn't
cup,
matter.
it's all worth it.
It might already be at this point. Like, he is playing supernova.
Yeah. Like, my rant earlier was reductive. Like, he has the talent, and we've seen Vezina Bob before. We've seen Bobrovsky do this before. I always believe that when a goalie of that talent falls off well before, the age curve should, like, and I think goalies last a lot longer than players in the NHL. Like, unless he's 40, I think any goalie can make a resurgence. We saw Carey Price do it before his body literally fell apart. But yeah, this whole contract for Bobrovsky will be worth it if they do the thing, if they make the cup finals and potentially win the cup. And oh man, is he doing it? And Anderson's been stellar.
Has Carolina even been bad? Like, the other night they were up 16-1 in shots at one point. Like, I don't feel like Carolina's playing bad. It's just Florida's counter-punching, and they generate off turnovers.
Well, Carolina's collected 2 of a possible 4 points.
That's right. That's right. The loser points.
I'm just checking the money puck deserve to win -meter. First game, Carolina heavily, like 72+%. And the second game, Carolina even more heavily, nearly 80%. And that doesn't mean anything.
Literally, the Florida Panthers will never look at those stats ever.
That's what I love about the playoffs is it legitimately does not matter. It's whatever team, scores that overtime goal. And, Anderson, like, Florida had so many quality chances in overtime, the one that went almost 4 full overtimes before Tkachuk ended it. And Anderson was standing on his head. I was like, this is the best of the best of playoff hockey. Like, Bobrovsky and Anderson both were great, but especially Anderson. And then I thought that, Carolina was primed to come back, get that one bounce, and do it because they were the better team over the course of the game. And it doesn't matter because Tkachuk closed it, and that's what matters in the playoffs. It does, Corsi or shots against or whoever controlled pace of play or time on ice or time on attack, I should say.
Doesn't matter.
No, you have to win those 16 games, and that's the beauty of the NHL playoffs. I also want to say I love extremely long overtime games.
You're sick.
Dude, feed it into my veins. I was hoping for the 5th overtime, and I was sleep deprived.
I can barely get to the third period if the game, especially if the game starts at 8. There's no hope.
8, not even 10:30. 8
Oh, you
PM.
know me. I've already got my pajamas on at that puck drop.
I love it, and that's I think they've changed the playoff structure a little bit. I don't like the bracketing. I don't like the lack of reseeding, but never, ever, ever change the infinite overtimes. It is just the purest of the pure of playoff hockey.
I would like to see them go to minor hockey tournament overtime rules: 5-on-5, 4-on-4, 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 1-on-1.
Do that in the regular season because that'd be funny. But no, Carolina's not been bad. Florida's just found a way to get it done. Credit to Tkachuk. You love to hate him. I was with a group of guys over the weekend, and they were all saying they can't stand Tkachuk. I'm like, yeah, no one likes playing against this guy.
Every team would line up to have him.
They're trying to. Every team's trying to recreate him in a lab.
Yeah.
And then Bobrovsky is. I know it's a meme, but like back on the force. Like I just love seeing Bob do this. Anyways, 2-0 Florida. I don't think they will, but imagine they pull off the sweep.
It'll be really interesting to see how Carolina responds next game because they've been dominating, but when you dominate and lose, that can be deflating to a locker room. So how they come out in Game 3 is going to be very critical to how this series may go.
100%, and they have to come out hot.
And they got Rod the Bod there as their coach. He'll just say some crazy speech. People will be running through walls. Like,
yeah,
I don't think they won't come out fired up.
Might not even be a crazy speech. He might just threaten them with physical violence.
He's just standing there with his shirt off doing dumbbells before the pregame, and then just walks out.
Curling in the squat rack.
Yeah.
Well, over in the West, equally kind of surprising, Vegas is up 2-0 on Dallas. Again, 2 overtime games, both East and Western Conference. Both the first 2 games were decided in overtime. Vegas up 2-0 as they won 4-3, and then I think it was 3-2. Not as lopsided, I think, in terms of play or in terms of like the surprising results. I think Vegas was better the first game. I think Dallas came back a lot more strong in the second game. But that's another series I'm surprised about that that's 2-0 walking away.
I mean, 2 overtime games, so I can't say super surprised. Did I pick Vegas to win the series?
You can lie and say you did.
I did, so I absolutely saw this coming. Once again, I am correct in my analysis, as Dallas is now surely going to win the next 4. No, I mean, these are 2 very similar, very evenly matched teams. So the fact we had 2 coin flip games, makes perfect sense. The only thing that doesn't make sense is it's Adin Hill against Jake Ottinger.
That's what I mean.
In theory,
man.
you'd think that is a heavy mismatch, but apparently it means nothing.
Adin Hill has been playing decidedly better, like by a lot. Adin Hill is 3rd in goals against average and 4th in save percentage.
Tell me again why we should overpay in trade and dollars for Connor Hellebuck.
That's, and
that's not a shot on Connor Hellebuck. Connor Hellebuck's great, but good God, no.
It's a losing formula to try to find an Adin Hill every year rather than a Jake Ottinger every year, because Jake Ottinger on average will be better, even come playoff time, but this just goes to show the hilarity of what goalies do. And something I've said a lot about the playoffs is your team goes as your goalie goes. If you are a fantastic team but you have no goaltending, see Toronto Maple Leafs, the floor is going to fall out from beneath you in the playoffs, where every inch, every shot, every hit is battled for with 100% more intensity than you saw for the 82 games in the regular season. If your goalie's not there to back you and they let in one soft goal could decide an entire playoffs. Dan Cloutier will tell you that. Like, you need a solid goalie. And sometimes, apparently, that's Adin Hill, who at one point in his career was seen as like a very below average goalie. His resurgence is...
Was that point like 6 weeks ago?
No, I think it goes back earlier than that. His time with San Jose, but I think that was more a San Jose thing than anything else. But yeah, again, shocking. And Vegas, credit to them, they've been fantastic. We talked about it before, but Eichel is probably now one of the odds-on favorites to win the Conn Smythe. So talk about a coming out party for him, and in his first NHL playoffs, like, he is proving a lot of people wrong.
Man, he should have been first overall in his draft, I think. Proven playoff producer, really drags his teams into the fight.
If he ends up winning a cup before Connor McDavid does, that's it.
McDavid requests a trade before Eichel gets that trophy over his head. That's it. No chance. Get me out of here.
He's going to Seattle.
Jack Eichel requesting a trade, domino effect, butterfly effect. Connor McDavid requests a trade. Just the way the NHL always works.
And to complete the cycle, he gets traded to the Buffalo Sabres.
No, stop that, Brad. We don't need him in the East. Anything? What do you guys expect of these 2 series? Both of them 2-0. Do you expect any completed sweeps or gentlemen sweeps?
More of the same.
Yeah?
Which really, this is everything. It could be everything and anything.
I predict 4 more overtimes. Every series ends in a sweep.
Oh, God.
That's my hyper specific prediction. We get 2 more Florida and Vegas overtime wins. Could you imagine? Could you actually imagine if that happened?
You still get the same amount of hockey played as if it was a 7-game series, but just in 4 games for each one.
That was like Red Wings Anaheim 97. Remember that one?
Of course.
When Kozlov beat Mikhail Shtolinkov with the glow puck
from
the half wall.
And then the net went on fire after.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
Too.
We should be so lucky to get that again. Well, that's the Stanley Cup playoffs. Excited to see what update's going to come around, but each series is probably going to be somehow 5-0 by the time we talk next, but we'll see where they're at when we talk next. For now, let's get into some NHL news. Toronto I know we talk about him a lot, but this is genuinely a wild turn of events. Last time we spoke, Kyle Dubas had his kind of strange press conference in which he stipulated that if he was going to go anywhere to GM at all, it would be in Toronto, but he's just not certain that he can because, it took a toll on his family, and I'm sure there's stuff going on in the background there. I viewed it as a bit of a weird negotiating thing, but I did think it was a negotiating position. I thought it was kind of strange to say that he wouldn't go anywhere else, but like kind of not threatened, but he was openly implying that he might not come back at all. At this point, very obviously, Toronto wanted him back and were trying to extend him. They won that first round series, and that it's reported that that's when that decision was made. And then it came out that Toronto decided to move on from Kyle Dubas. So they let his contract run out, and they aren't going to be bringing him back. And to very clearly state this, that's not Dubas making that decision to not come back, as he implied might be the case. That's Brendan Shanahan and the Toronto Maple Leafs saying, nope, we are moving on. So piecing together a lot of things that were said by Brendan Shanahan and by various reports, apparently what happened was Kyle Dubas, after that press conference, Shanahan saw it, didn't really love what he saw there, was kind of caught off guard. And then Dubas's representation came back later in the week to say Kyle has confirmed that he wants to return to the Maple Leafs, and then also had a counteroffer to the standing extension on the table for Kyle Dubas, which was apparently for like 5 years. I'm not sure on the numbers. I saw reports of like $4 million-ish in there, but GM salaries don't matter. Doesn't count against the cap. And to confirm, Dubas apparently confirmed to Shanahan by email that he wants to return, if that matters to you at all. So that happened. The counteroffer came in, and then evidently Shanahan made the decision to say, yeah, we're not going with Kyle. Very obviously, what he said out loud was he didn't like the press conference to some degree, but I think some quiet context back here is that counteroffer is really what decided this. And there's two factors. One, it could be the increased money, but as we know, MLSE money is pouring out of their pockets. But I think two, he must have asked for a control structure that basically tried to either sidestep Shanahan or seriously reduce Shanahan's control. And that's a pretty bold thing to ask Brendan Shanahan, who controls the entire hockey operations in Toronto, and that's when he decided to move it out. So I don't know what you guys make of it, but what a wild turn of events.
This is one of those rare circumstances where I feel like both parties involved were being a petulant child. I don't know how else to phrase it. Dubas, one, should never have done that press conference. Shanahan even told him, hey, maybe don't do this press conference, but Dubas said he wanted to do it, and Shanahan respected his wishes. And then he goes out and gives, all these weird answers that, like, in Dubas' defense, they weren't necessarily bad answers. You want to put your family first. You want to make sure your family's comfortable with what you're doing in your future plans. Sure. And those are all conversations you definitely need to have behind the scenes. But one, that's not a conversation you have with your boss, and that's definitely not a conversation you have with the media. But whatever, those are, for the most part, just words. And then, he confirmed, okay, yeah, I talked about it with my family. We're good. We want to do this. Okay, here's my counteroffer at the last second without giving you any heads up, which, most mega corporations aren't fans of. We're negotiating in good faith this whole time, and then all of a sudden, ta-da! Here's my request for more money and more control.
I want to push back on that after.
I'm not saying that a counteroffer is a bad thing. I'm saying the timing of it after everything he just did was what probably sewered him on that one.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then Shanahan going, all right, screw you, bud, you're done. Like, just quickly, too, I might add. Because Dubas came back with that counteroffer Thursday night, and he was gone by Friday morning. Like, did not take Brendan a lot of time to mull that one over. So I think the one way Steve was listening to his podcast after this news broke, and he put it in a really well-reasoned way. Toronto is not a process team anymore. With how rash and irrationally and how quickly everything happened here and how quickly they threw the original plan out the window This isn't a process team anymore. This is we're just going to go by what our gut's telling us.
I agree with you that everyone seems to have acted a little bit emotionally, a little bit rash, and a little bit, the timing wasn't advantageous for them here. I don't disagree if Brendan Shanahan had a problem with the money or the control structure that Dubas came out with. And after that press conference, like that's the public image of saying, I don't know that I'm 100% committed to coming back next season, and then asking for more in terms of money and, more importantly, control over hockey ops. Like, those two they're not just antithetical. They just don't mesh. You can't have those things. And the GM is the face of the team in a lot of ways. So you really can't have that, especially in a market like Toronto. So from a management perspective, I don't blame Shanahan, who I'll say I have some bias towards because he's my favorite player of all time here. But I don't blame him for not liking that. But you also have to recognize that they let Dubas have a lame duck year in terms of his contract extension. They didn't decide until they won that first round that they wanted to extend him.
It's like betting on yourself almost, but GM version.
Yeah, and Dubas rolled with it. Yeah, Shanahan decided sometime around the trade deadline, apparently, that they wanted to extend him, and then the decision was finalized, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But if you let someone go into their last year in a head coaching or a management position without an extension, that is a lame duck administrative member, and you have to expect that they are going to protect their best interests. Do I agree with the way Dubas was negotiating publicly, or even if it wasn't a negotiation and it was genuine statements? No, I agree with Shanahan there that he should have kept that more private, but you also can't be shocked. We don't know what went into that offer. Apparently their relationship had been a little bit tense for a while. The structure was like Dubas wants to do something, it goes up to Shanahan. Shanahan has to send it up to ownership. It comes back down to Shanahan, goes back down to Dubas. Like, that's insane. You can't operate a business that way. If you own a business, you need to have your people have the agency to make decisions that fall in line with your values, your ethos, your beliefs, or whatever. Otherwise, you don't have the right people hired. So I don't blame Dubas for asking for something different, but I don't know. Maybe there's something in that offer that was just absolutely wild to drive Shanahan nuts here. It was, reported that Shanahan had shot down more than one of Dubas's proposed moves in the past. I saw something like Nyes and a first for Hagel and Marc-Andre Fleury or something like that in the past. I don't know necessarily that that's true, but we know that Shanahan had shot down what Dubas wanted to do on more than one occasion, and so you can say that that was probably getting to be a tense situation. So there's some background here. All in all, though, it does seem to be hasty and rash, and I don't know how you can justify to your fans the 180 from we want to hire this guy for 5 years to we're moving on from him over the course of like 72 hours.
It's for a team that's attempting to win a cup in now a very short amount of time. It's certainly a complicating move. I think Matthews is on record saying that his relationship with Dubas is like a driving factor for him being in Toronto and loving being in Toronto. So, oops, that's not ideal.
Apparently, players are frustrated. Like some have either in exit interviews or in conversations with various reporters. I know Friedman said a player texted him and said they were not thrilled with what was happening. There's a lot of confusion. Like, this is going to have reverberations through the organization.
Yeah, and I'm sure the list of candidates to replace Kyle Dubas is all very top-tier talent with no questionable picks being brought to the table.
Shanahan said he wanted someone with experience who wasn't afraid to make tough decisions with some bite.
What the hell does that even mean?
It means Peter Chiarelli, come on down. Mark Bergevin's name was thrown around. Hunter's name was thrown around.
Oh my god!
This is great for us, though.
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. And outside of who they hire, like, because we can joke saying, "Oh, bad GM will be hired. Detroit will get their best players," but they're signaling they are going to do a big reset here. They are signaling that if they can't get Matthews signed before July 1st,
he gone.
They might have to make sure they don't lose that asset for nothing. They're signaling that, Marners and Nylander aren't safe. There's not only Toronto's downfall, which is good for Detroit potentially in the standings in the long term, is in play here, but players are in play here. Like, a shakeup in the Atlantic with one of the teams with the most talent is exactly what Atlantic foes like the Red Wings need.
Who is the Red Wings player most comparable to Adam Larson?
Ben Sherratt.
No, I feel like he's somewhere between Jake Wallman and Olli Maatta.
We'll start out Olli Maatta.
Either way, which one of those are you giving up for Mitch Marner when Chiarelli gets there?
We'll give them both. Just a sweetener.
Oh, why?
I don't think we'll have to. Don't get carried away, Evan.
I think you could sell Olli Maatta. I think you.
No, we got to kick in a fourth. You got to be fair here, Ryan. Be realistic.
You know what?
Hold on, before I get the tweets. Everybody knows this is sarcasm, right?
No, you. It is important that you're stipulating that
because there will be tweets.
Yeah.
Unless Peter Chiarelli gets hired, then these are very literal statements.
They're trying to come in and do this big reset, but their hands are tied in a lot of regard. Like, what if Matthews does what Larkin does? It's easier said than done, but are you really going to move Matthews? How are you going to move Tavares' contract if you want to?
Their hands are not tied. There are complications here, but Matthews' no trade doesn't kick in until July 1. I don't think Marner has one, or it hasn't kicked in yet. Nylander doesn't have one, I don't believe. They have very, very valuable pieces that teams will covet. These are not easy moves. These are not simple moves, and they are time-sensitive moves. But if Matthews goes, I was a Kyle guy, he's gone, I'm not extending before July 1, the new GM can go, okay, that's totally fair, and trade him on June 30th. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not completely handcuffed. I'd say the only unmovable contract on that team right now is Tavares. So they have pieces to work with. It's just, it's what's going to be their Adam Larson for Taylor Hall.
On the Dubas side of things, the Penguins have already received permission to talk to him, and I would not be surprised if they dump the Brinks truck to get him in like a president of hockey ops position. I think they're already pretty deep in their GM search.
Imagine getting fired into a promotion.
I could also see Ottawa potentially, although it seems that Michael Andlauer is the odds-on favorite at this point to become the next owner of the Sens. He was the minority owner of the Canadiens, so he would obviously have to sell that portion, but very easy for him to do. And he's been linked to Steve Staios to bring him over. So I don't know that he would necessarily bring in Dubas, but potentially in a president of hockey ops position there too. So Dubas is going to have options. And
he'll be all right.
He's going to make a lot of money, so he'll be fine.
I don't give a shit what Andlauer does. What would Snoop Dogg do?
It's not looking good for that bid.
Yeah, I know, but
it's funny, all this fanfare about the celebrity bids, and then you just get like a bona fide, tried and true hockey owner who has already owned part of another team.
Oh, must be the NHL we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Not my team to sell. Whoever's going to give him $1 billion, I don't care who I'd sell to. Good for you. Anyhow, all of that with the Leafs has been
crazy.
I can't believe how quickly that turned around and it just fired off in the other direction.
It just felt like it happened literally out of nowhere. I woke up and that was the first thing I saw.
Yeah, insane. Okay, some very quick updates here. We talked about the World Championships, just some stat updates. Kubalik is up to 8 goals and 4 assists. He is the name player in that tournament right now, and this is the Kubalik that we saw at the start of last season. And honestly, I think he's going to get attention because of this.
Oh, he might. And he's coming off a near 50-point season, so.
He's always been a really good goal scorer. It's not going to be a surprise, but this is like a little off-season refresher for folks that, Kubalik has a absolute weapon from that spot. And elsewhere, Berggren has 2 goals, 4 assists. Raymond is up to 2 goals and 5 assists. Mazur's still at a goal and assists. Seider is a goal and 2 assists. And Olli Maatta, 5 assists. So Detroit Red Wings, Veleno notwithstanding, continuing to do well over there.
Olli Maatta, you say?
That's right.
Hey, Pete, you seeing this?
And a quick update here. Belated congratulations to our good friend and Detroit Red Wings lead announcer, Ken Daniels. Just recently was inducted into the Legends Plaza at Detroit Historical Museum alongside obvious legends Ben Wallace and Lomas Brown, Amir Makupson, and George Blaha. Ken's recognition across the hockey and sports community in Michigan especially continues to grow because it's well deserved. So congratulations to Ken Daniels on that. And The Athletic is doing their annual broadcast ratings poll where they measure the popularity and success and how well each NHL broadcast does across the league. So we'll link to it. And if you subscribe to The Athletic, go show the Bally Sports Detroit, Ken, Mickey Redmond, that entire crew over there, your support. Pound for pound, one of the best sports broadcasts in all of professional sports and absolutely the best in the NHL. So they've won the honors before. So let's continue to show them our support. And one last note here, actually, I should mention, Elliot Friedman reported that one of the potential coaches in Calgary's coaching search, he wouldn't be surprised if Alex Tanguay's name is on that list. Craig Conroy was obviously named GM over there, and Alex Tanguay is seen as very popular as a potential coaching replacement for various spots, and Calgary was noted this time around. Tanguay's involvement in Detroit's offense is something that'll be focused on, and they'll want to get a more offensive flow going to their game. Not a surprise considering they just got rid of Sutter, who Huberdeau came in and had a half as productive season as he had the year before with Florida, so they're really trying to maximize that. Tanguay is not the first Detroit assistant in some capacity to be named. Sean Horkoff was a guy who was kind of pitched as a potential executive for another GM or president hockey ops spot in various spots around the league. So Red Wings administration names are starting to come up again. So Tanguay, if coaches or teams are looking for more of an offensive coach, expect to hear Tanguay's name more and more. And this was a stepping stone position for him too. When he came in, he wants to gain experience to potentially one day be an NHL head coach. When that'll happen, I don't know, but it's starting to buzz.
Well, it makes sense because let me tell you, when I think about elite NHL offenses, I think about the Detroit Red Wings.
There is something to say about he did come in, and for flashes in the pan, Detroit's power play looked phenomenal.
There were moments.
It did get
over 82 games. There were moments.
Unexplainably cold still at points, but that's been a theme of the Red Wings for, 7-8 years now.
Yeah.
So who's to say what he would do with a different roster on a different team? But don't be surprised if that happens at some point in the near to medium term future. Okay, let's jump into overtime here. Overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, again, is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to get benefits like hearing thoughts with Evan in our bonus episodes, our Winged Wheel Podcast exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. You support the show's growth. You support Expected by Whom and all of our expanded content. You support the Jamie Daniels Foundation and partnered events with the Detroit Red Wings, like Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA. So patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you can and are able to support. Let's take some questions from some patrons. The Jims says, "Hey boys, just like the rest of us, I really want to see the Wings take some big swings this draft and offseason to bolster the roster. All the speculation of who we could pull from Toronto or the Jets is exciting. Here's the kick in the balls. Do you think it is more likely that the Wings land Nylander or Kyle Connor, or rather a deal falls with Toronto and Winnipeg swapping players? Both teams looking to make big adjustments with high-end talent options."
Well, that is the more likely option. And the more and more time that passes, the less and less likely it sounds like Kyle Connor's getting moved. So, yeah, neither is very likely. The Red Wings won't likely want Nylander because of the 1-year term. The Jets don't seem to be moving Connor, but a Winnipeg-Toronto trade does make sense in a lot of ways.
Tatar Sauce says, "What would it take for the Wings to get Keller? Is there any other sleeper, low-key talked about forwards for a trade besides the usual Connor or DeBrincat?"
Nick Schmaltz.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Nick Schmaltz. We'll do this in a future episode, too.
Yeah, so he's basically... not every year, but he was a near point per game player this season. He's normally going to finish in the 50 to 60 point range. So if you're looking for some, second line scoring, and I think he only makes like $6 million a year with 3 years left on his contract, that's a very, very attractive option. And because of, all the Chychrun rumors to the last couple of years, and now the Keller rumors, Schmaltz often gets overlooked. That being said, I would much prefer Clayton Keller, but maybe both.
Yeah.
Pick both. Trade for both. Let's get weird. How many first-round picks for both? 4?
Ooh, that's a lot of first-round picks. I'd want to keep 1 this year.
Keep 9 and give them the other 3.
Great.
In a heartbeat.
Let's do it. They're going to be free agents after the team folds anyways.
Yeah.
Jonah Blatt says, "Between the draft and potential trades / UFAs, what does your ideal offseason for the Red Wings look like?"
Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. What?
You walk away from the draft with some kind of high producing potential forward coming out of there, at least one. A trade, like Brad said, maybe for Keller, maybe for Connor, maybe for Schmaltz, whoever, utilizing Detroit's wealth of assets, and then a solution for right D on the second line, on the second pairing for me. Lars Thorzel says, hey, boys, do you really think there's any sense of urgency about becoming so much better next season than the season that just ended? Another season similar to this one is pretty much what I'd expect. I don't get why we are supposed to trade prospects and picks now to get top talent. A top player, while exciting, doesn't really move us that much further along. We still have glaring holes in the lineup. What's the sudden rush?
You're misconstruing what we're saying. All of the trade proposals we are, hypothesizing have nothing to do with this upcoming season. I don't give a shit what the Red Wings do this season. If they finish 16th or 24th, it has almost no bearing on my opinion on anything they do. They have glaring holes that they need to fill to become Stanley Cup contenders in, 3 to 5 years, let's say. The reality is these are likely not to come via free agency or the draft. So that only leaves one other solution to solve them. I would like to pick an Oliver Moore at number 9, hypothetically, because I think he could be a second-line center on a Cup team if everything goes well, paired with Dylan Larkin. I also would like to trade for Clayton Keller because in 3 to 4 years, I think he could be a contributor on the Red Wings when they are getting over that threshold into being of the upper echelon of the NHL. The reason the urgency is here is eventually they have to do it or they're never going to open that window. It doesn't have to be this summer. But the draft and develop part of this rebuild, for the most part, is done. Like they are now starting. This could be the last year they're drafting in a position where they can draft a player, an impact player, and they're not just drafting for depth. So, if a Ryan Leonard or an Oliver Moore, a Dalibor Dvorsky, whoever they pick this year, doesn't turn into a superstar, that was their last window for that anyway. So now it's all about, here's the pool of picks and prospects we have. How do we turn this into a top 6 player? To quote Billy Beane, how do we recreate this in the aggregate? Because they don't have anybody or anything to fill those holes, so they have to create it out of what they have.
Unfortunately, I agree fully with you, Brad. I will have to wash my mouth out with soap later, but yeah, they're just out of this phase of being in pure rebuild. Not because it's, we've been here for too long and we're bored, although there is something to be said. The fans can't do this forever, and the very real impatience and frustration was palpable this year, and that's not to be discredited, but because the players are getting too good. You now have Seider, you have Larkin, you have Raymond, and you have, Wallman, you have a bunch of players who are not only already good, but continuing to get better, especially when you talk about the young guys. You're no longer going to be in a position to draft higher really than you are now, barring some insane lottery luck. And as Brad said, yeah, to build a Cup contender, you have to iterate. You have to build that depth. You have to build winning play styles. You have to build the culture, and it does not happen overnight. We've seen it time and time and time and time and time again. Does that wash away the fact that the Red Wings don't have a game breaker? No. That is still a very glaring issue that Detroit has to address. But hanging out in like the 14th to 9th worst team in the league phase without trying to get better is not a solution, because it's not going to come that way. We don't know how it's going to come about. It could be a trade. It could be a 3rd round pick. It could be a random UFA signing. It could be anything, but it's just not, it hasn't come through draft lottery luck. And so you just can't wait by the side of the road. You have to start walking towards the gas station. Really weird metaphor for me, but yeah, in general, you have to start building towards that. And Steve's going to have to improv this. Yzerman's going to have to figure out along the way how to solve the scoring and game breaker issue. But yeah, for now, try the greater than the sum of your parts thing.
And it's the reason why when people bring up, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mark Scheifele trade proposals, we just wave them on by, because the Red Wings are not in a position to trade for anybody who's got 1 year left on their contract.
Unless they can get a commitment.
Yeah, there's always a sign and trade, but those are so rare, I almost don't even entertain the idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we should trade for Austin Matthews. If he's willing to extend for, a bunch of years, absolutely you should. But as of right now, that's not an option. So, we don't need 1 year of Austin Matthews. We need 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of Austin Matthews if we're going to do that.
And let me say, if a player of like Matthews' caliber goes to unrestricted free agency, then the focus is to offer the maximum dollars for as long as you can, because yes, you'll overpay. Yeah, it's going to cause a cap crunch. Yeah, you're going to be in pain for 7 years trying to always fit that in, kind of like Toronto has been, but it's worth it because you have a superstar goal scorer.
And as Tampa Bay and Vegas have taught us, the cap is fake.
Yep.
So don't worry about it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you all for tuning in. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, new and old. If you want to support the show in other ways that aren't Patreon, you can give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcast, subscribe, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is. It helps a lot. We'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters, especially our name level sponsors, Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Wait For It, We Are Geelong, the greatest team of all, Glenn Brabham, The Hat 123, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Croner's Left Knee, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Babe Landeskog, Bros Before Hosas, Carl Brutanen Nanaluski, Shimmy, Chris P., Citizen High Five, Connor Scovey, Cookin' with Kosa, Coyote Season Tickets in Anywhere But Tempe, Denny's Gamer Girl, Jarek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood Fight Probert, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al Qassem, I Missed Cronwall, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kalen Wood, Kevin James, King Tone, Marcus, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Ryan, the Ryan Hannah, Scott Martin, That's What I Appreciates About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, #1 Detroit Red Guys fan, A.A. Ron, Adam Gowitza, Adam Rose, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Captain Antonio Gracias of the United Federation of Cheesebags, C.J. Wilkinson, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Dungeon Master of Puppets, Evans Lost Rangefinder, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Grand Rapids Hockey Guy, Griffey Boy, Instructions Unclear, Cheesebag No Longer Fresh, James Laporte, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Ophelia, Steven, Tatar Sauce, The Hodag, The Original Button of Lemon, and the St. Louis Blueth. Thank you all so very much, and we will talk to you midweek.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.